Hey everyone, welcome back to Ontario Gardening. Today we are making 1 hour bagels, and that is 1 hour total time, not just rise time. So they're super quick and they're super easy. This recipe makes about 8 to 12 bagels. I do 12 a little bit smaller bagels so that I can make 2 6-packs, but if you wanted to do bigger bagels, you can totally do that. That'll be your preference when you cut it. So in order to make this recipe, we're gonna need 2 cups of water, and that's warmed to about 98 degrees. A teaspoon of instant yeast, 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 tablespoons of white sugar, and 5 cups of just all-purpose flour. We're also good tools for this would be your stand mixer, a slotted spoon. We're gonna need a couple of baking trays lined with parchment paper, and a pot full of hot boiling water. Once we get there, I will show you that, but those are the tools that you need for this. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add that teaspoon of the instant yeast to water that is warmed up to about 98 degrees. So you can do that in the microwave for about 30 seconds and that should do it. We're just mixing that around a little bit and we're going to let it sit for a second. While that's sitting, we are going to add our 5 cups of flour and our 2 other dry ingredients here to the bowl of our mixer, and we already have our kneading attachment, our dough hook on here. Okay, so we have our 5 cups of flour in that bowl, and now I'm going to add that 2 tablespoons of sugar and the 2 teaspoons of salt. Now, before I continue on and add that wet into here and start the dough, it is at this point we are making plain bagels. We're actually going to make everything bagels, but at this point this is a plain bagel. If you wanted to add additions to your dough, so for example brown sugar and cinnamon and raisins to make like a raisin bagel, it's at this point while the dough is mixing that you're going to add that kind of stuff in here, and it's going to mix into your dough. The everything bagel of course is a little bit different because that's just sprinkling stuff on top. But if you wanted to do like a jalapeno and cheddar, at this point you would put the jalapeno and the cheddar cheese in here. Tomato basil, same thing. The basil and the tomato would go at this point before, as it's mixing. So I just wanted to say that because of course this is just your bagel base recipe. So we've come over here and we are letting this sit for about 5 minutes until it becomes a little bit frothy at the top, and it's at that point that we're going to put it into our mixer. So I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes till this gets a little bit frothier. Okay, so I've let that couple minutes pass. It's gotten a little bit frothy, and we're going to throw that now into the mixer with our dry ingredients. Okay, so at this point we are going to turn our mixer onto setting 2, and we are going to let this mix for about 15 minutes until the dough starts to get elasticy. And don't worry, I'm going to show you as we go along. So flipping it, sorry, trying that again. We're flipping it to 2, and it's gonna start mixing. And like I said, this takes about 15 minutes, so don't get discouraged if you don't see the dough forming for a little bit. This is gonna be like, between this and just the 15-minute process time is the biggest part of it. So I'm gonna let this sit for 15 minutes, and then I will show you what it looks like when we come back. Okay, so it's been going for about 15 minutes, and as you can see, all of the dough has pulled from the side and it's nice and formed. So we're going to stop this mixer, and as you can see here, it's in a nice elasticy, it does break off a little, but it's a nice elasticy dough, and that is what we're going to do now. So we're going to take this out and we're going to put it onto a floured surface and make our bagels. Okay, so we're just putting it into a ball here on this kneaded surface, on this floured surface, so that it just makes it easier to cut. So you can use a nice sharp knife if you have one. If not, we're using a bench cutter, and we're just going to split this dough in half, and each one of our halves will be like a package of bagels for us. So like I said, it's at this point you can decide how many pieces that you want. It makes up to 12 comfortable bagel pieces, and that's what we do. So we're just going to cut them up into equal sizes. Now it's at this point you also can decide whether you want them to be like all exactly perfect, or whether you just don't care and you can just do like random as close as you want sizes. So if you were like, say, giving them to somebody, or you really wanted to make them show-stopping looking bagels, you can take a measure or scale and scale out each piece so that they were all exactly equal. But quite honestly, this is a good start if you had all of these pieces, because we're just going to make balls and bagel shapes. So as long as they're relatively close, and if you want to make this a quick 1 hour bagel for breakfast or whatever, don't stress about the sizes and the shapes, because we're going to fix that. Okay, so once you have them into your equal pieces, we are going to make balls. So you're taking it and you're folding the seam towards the middle, and then you're going to put it seam side down, use the palm of your hand, and make circles until you get a nice ball formed. And as you can see, we've got nice little balls starting to form. So we're going to do that with all of our pieces. Don't get frustrated. It does take a little bit of practice to get the ball part down. So as you can see, we're folding the sides into the middle, putting that seam down, and using our hand to make the ball, and then just kind of cupping underneath, making that nice ball. So practice a little bit. You've got 12 pieces to practice with. Do the best you can, and every time you're going to get better at it. It's like that we've done it, multiple times, so we've practiced a little bit, but just continue like trying until you get those balls. We're going to do all 12, and then we will show you how to easily make the bagel shape. Okay, so to make the bagel shape, we're going to take it into our hands. You're going to use your thumb underneath, poke a hole, and like split it open. And then you're kind of just going to work it with your hands and just continue to open it a little bit. They don't have to be huge because they will spread as they bake. But as you can see, you've made your bagel shape. So to show you again, poking our thumbs through until you kind of rip it open, and then opening it up and working it around until you've got that nice bagel shape. Now we're going to put 6 on each one of our baking trays. And once we have done that, we are going to let them sit and rise for 15 minutes. Now, while they're sitting on here and rising for 15 minutes, and you can cover them with a piece of saran wrap or a damp towel if you'd like, just to keep any debris off of them. While you have these rising for 15 minutes, we are going to come to our stove, to that pot of water, and we are going to add a teaspoon of honey. And if you don't have honey, just a teaspoon of sugar is fine. And we're going to get that up to a boil. And if you're wondering what this is all about, you do a quick dunk of the bagels in here, and it kind of helps them like cure, and it would also help get them wet to attach any like everything bagel spice or any other spices that you wanted to the top before baking. So I'm going to let these sit for 15 minutes while this water boils, and then we will be back to show you the last steps of making these bagels. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes. As you can see, they don't double in size like your typical recipe. They just kind of get like poofy. So they are gotten a little bit bigger, but you're looking more for that poof than necessarily doubled in size. I've got my oven preheated to 375. If you haven't yet, do that now. And now we are going to do this whole dunking process. So I've got my honey or sugar water up to a boil. Now what is going to happen is we are going to take, I do 3 at a time, and we're going to just drop them in, 1, 2, and 3. We leave that for 30 seconds, and then we're going to flip them in the water and do it for another 30 seconds. So that's where this slotted spoon comes in handy. Okay, so I've got my slotted spoon. You know that they're ready for the first flip when they've started to float to the top of the water. So it's at this point we're just going to take them and honestly just flip them in this water. So we flipped them. Hopefully you caught that. And then we're going to leave them for another 30 seconds, and then we're transferring them back to the parchment paper. Okay, so now we're good. As you can see, at this point they're kind of getting a little bit bigger. And now I'm putting them back on the pan. They're going to be moist, so if we wanted to add any of our spices or if you're adding any toppings, it's at this point you would do it. So I've done this, and now I'm going to drop my next batch in while I kind of sprinkle those. So 1, 2, and 3 into the water. And while that's going, I've got my everything bagel seasoning. And while it's sticky, I'm putting it on. So I'm gonna do a batch of everything bagel on this tray, and we're actually gonna keep those plain, but you still need to do the water dip. So back over here, you can see that they're starting to float, and we're gonna flip them, and we're gonna continue on this process until they're all done. Okay, so we've got them all dunked and back on the trays, and we are ready to put them in the oven. So like I said, we've got our oven at 375 degrees, and we are gonna put these in and bake them for 15 minutes. So in 15 minutes, I will come back and show you what they look like. Okay, so we've got our bagels out of the oven, and they are now cooling on the cooling rack. Look at these bagels. They are just perfect, perfectly cooked, toasted, nice and squishy. They are just gorgeous. So like I said, we made those, and then we did make a batch of our plains. So they're a little bit smaller than you would be used to, like at a commercial bagel. They obviously have molds and stuff, but these are homemade, and nothing beats a homemade bagel. I am telling you, the taste of these is just out of this world. So thank you for following along for this tutorial. We are going to get into sourdough next week. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.